Hi guys, and this is chapter 17, the last chapter before your next lecture exam. And this is a really interesting chapter on nutrition and metabolism, how your body breaks down the food we eat and turns it into energy, and also body temperature regulation. So nutrition is the process by which food is taken into and used by your body. We'll talk about digestion, absorption, transport, and metabolism. And the study of nutrition involves the study of the food and drink requirements for normal body function. Nutrients will be the chemicals taken into the body that provide energy and building blocks for new molecules. So MyPlate is a U.S. Department of Health and Human Services kind of joint undertaking with the U.S. Department of Agriculture to recommend what Americans should eat to be healthy. This MyPlate, a new food icon, replaced the former food guide icon called My Pyramid. And MyPlate is just a simple visual reminder of how to build a healthy meal. It shows a plate and glass with portions representing fruits, vegetables, grains, proteins, and dairy. To emphasize the importance of making healthy food choices, half of the plate is always fruits and vegetables. And you can go to choosemyplate.gov, which is a website that includes more information on how to make healthy dieting choices. This choosemyplate.gov is a website, just more information on how to make diet choices. But this is kind of the main icon that represents the myplate.gov icon. Again, try to make half your plate fruits and veggies, and the other half the grains, the protein, and the dairy. So we'll talk about kilocalories. A calorie describes the amount of energy required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water 1 degree Celsius, and a kilocalorie is equal to 1,000 calories. Nutrients can be divided into 6 major classes, and we'll go over those 6 classes that you can see there right now. A balanced diet will consist of enough nutrients in the correct proportions to support normal body functions. We talk about essential nutrients because these are nutrients that must be ingested because the body cannot make them or it cannot make them in adequate amounts. The essential nutrients include certain amino acids, certain fatty acids, most vitamins, minerals, water, and some carbohydrates. So we'll start talking about carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are molecules that contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, where the ratio of hydrogen to oxygen is always a 2-to-1 ratio, as shown here as an example of C6H12O6. That's the molecular formula for sugar or glucose. Carbohydrates include monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. A monosaccharide is a simple sugar made up of one sugar molecule, and an example of these are glucose and fructose. A disaccharide is 2 sugars where you combine monosaccharides together. So if you combine a glucose and a fructose together, you would get the sucrose disaccharide. Combining glucose and galactose, you would get lactose. And then polysaccharides is just a link of many sugars linked together, such as starch, grain, vegetables, and glycogen. A simple carbohydrate has no nutritional value. It causes weight gain. And an example of a simple carbohydrate is candy and soft drinks, which have about 9 teaspoons of sugar in them. The recommended amount of these are sparingly. Complex carbohydrates contain more fiber that helps decrease colon cancer and heart disease. So an example of complex carbohydrates are whole grains, pastas, rice, and bread. And it's recommended to eat them in moderation at every meal. For example, a serving is 1 piece of bread or half a cup of uncooked pasta. Carbohydrates work as short-term energy storage. They're able to be converted to glucose quickly, and glucose is then what goes on into cellular respiration to make ATP, or your body's energy currency, and the brain also uses glucose in its cells. Lipids then are totally or partially insoluble in water. They include triglycerides, steroids, phospholipids, and fat-soluble vitamins. Triglycerides are the most common type of lipid in your diet. They account for about 95% of the total lipid intake. And if the fat is a liquid at room temperature, it is referred to as an oil. Fats can be saturated or unsaturated. Saturated fats have only single covalent bonds between carbon atoms, and fats are unsaturated if they have one or more double bonds. A monosaturated fat has only one double bond, and polyunsaturated fats have 2 or more double bonds. Saturated fats are found in meat, dairy products, eggs, nuts, coconut oil, and palm oil. And monounsaturated fats include olive and peanut oils, and polyunsaturated fats are found in fish, safflower, sunflower, and corn oils. Unsaturated fats are considered better for us. They are liquid at room temperature, and saturated fats, because they have single bonds in their molecular structure, they're able to stack more neatly on top of each other. So they're solid at room temperature, they're bad for us, and it's just harder for our body to break them down. Trans fatty acids are processed fats and oils. They will raise LDL and lower HDL, and LDL is the bad cholesterol. They will increase the risk of heart disease. Cholesterol is a steroid, and it's highly concentrated in the brain, liver, egg yolks, whole milk, cheese, butter, and meats. LDL cholesterol is low density lipoprotein. It's bad, and it can carry cholesterol from your liver to your cells. HDL is considered the good cholesterol because it carries cholesterol from your cells to the liver to be processed, and you can increase the amounts of HDL cholesterol through exercise. The recommended amount of lipids in your diet are very sparingly for saturated fats. Cholesterol about 300 milligrams per day, which is about equivalent to 1 egg yolk. Lipids can cause weight gain and heart disease, and also increase the risk of colon and pancreatic cancer. So in order to reduce fat and cholesterol, you can eat poultry, fish and beans, eat vegetables and fruits, use herbs and spices for seasonings instead of salt, butter, sugar, remove the skin, broil, bake, and grill, limit creams and butter, and avoid processed cheese, egg yolks, and liver. The functions of lipids are also to be a long-term energy storage. They will insulate the body against heat loss. They serve as a protective cushion for organs. And cholesterol, an example of a lipid, is part of the cell membrane structure. Proteins then are just chains of amino acids and are found in most of the plant and animal products eaten. They're constructed of 20 different kinds of amino acids, which are divided into 2 groups, whether they are essential or non-essential. The body cannot synthesize essential amino acids, so we must obtain those from our diet. And the 9 essential amino acids that we must obtain from our diet are listed there. A complete protein food contains all 9 essential amino acids in the needed proportions, whereas an incomplete protein food does not. Animal proteins tend to be complete, whereas plant proteins tend to be incomplete. And some plant-based foods, such as soy or quinoa, are sources of complete proteins. Amino acids aren't stored, so a daily supply is required, and a recommended amount is 1 to 3 servings of nuts or beans, 0 to 2 servings of fish, poultry, eggs, and red meat sparingly. Functions of proteins: they're used to make skin, hair, nails, muscles. They help make our hemoglobin in our red blood cells that carries the oxygen. They will act as enzymes. They have immune system functions. They work with muscle contractions and part of the cell membrane. Organic molecules in small quantities in food needed for metabolism describes your vitamins. A balanced diet gives the body a wide variety of vitamins, and the absence of vitamins usually results in deficiency diseases. Vitamins can be fat or water soluble. Fat soluble vitamins include A, D, E, and K, and water soluble include the B complex and C. Essential vitamins cannot be produced by the body and must be obtained through the diet, just like essential proteins. A provitamin is a part of a vitamin that the body can assemble or modify into a functional vitamin, such as the conversion in the body to the active form of vitamin D. Most vitamins function as coenzymes, which combine with enzymes to make the enzymes functional. And the Food and Nutrition Board established these recommended dietary allowances, which are nutrient intakes that are sufficient to meet the needs of nearly all people. RDAs were established for different aged males and females, starting with infants and on to adults, and they are also set for pregnant and lactating women. So now we'll go through some of your vitamins. So vitamin A is also known as retinol. It's from the provitamin carotene found in yellow and green vegetables. It's preformed in liver, egg yolk, butter, and milk. It's necessary for rhodopsin synthesis to help with your photoreceptor cells in your eyes, normal health of epithelial cells, and bone and tooth growth. The deficiency causes rhodopsin deficiency, night blindness, retarded growth, skin disorders, and increased infection risk. Vitamin B1, also known as thiamine, is found in yeast, grains, and milk. And this vitamin is involved in carbohydrate and amino acid metabolism, very necessary for growth. Deficiency causes beriberi, which is a muscle weakness, including your cardiac muscle, neuritis, which is an inflammation of your neurons, and paralysis. B2 is riboflavin. This is found in green vegetables, liver, wheat germ, milk, and eggs. It's involved in the citric acid cycle because it's a component of flavin adenine dinucleotide. And its deficiency causes eye disorders, skin cracking, especially at the corners of the mouth. B3 is niacin, found in fish, liver, red meat, yeast, grains, peas, beans, and nuts. Deficiency causes pellagra, which could lead to diarrhea, dermatitis, inflammation of the skin, and nervous system disorder. Pantothenic acid is found in those foods listed there. It's a constituent of coenzyme A, which is important in glucose production from lipids and amino acids, also important for steroid hormone synthesis. So a deficiency could cause neuromuscular dysfunction and fatigue. Biotin is a fatty acid and is involved in fatty acid and nucleic acid synthesis and the movement of pyruvic acid into the citric acid cycle, which is one of the steps in cellular respiration to make ATP. Deficiency can cause mental and muscle dysfunction, fatigue, and nausea. Vitamin B6 is involved in amino acid metabolism, and a deficiency can cause dermatitis, retarded growth, and also nausea. Folate is involved in nucleic acid synthesis, hematopoiesis, and also folate prevents birth defects. So you'll find in a lot of prenatal vitamins, they will have folic acid in them. A deficiency can cause macrocytic anemia, which is enlarged red blood cells, and also spina bifida, which is a common birth defect of the spine if the spinal vertebral column does not close all the way. Vitamin B12 is necessary for red blood cell production, some nucleic acid and amino acid metabolism, and a deficiency causes pernicious anemia and nervous system disorders. Vitamin C is commonly found in your citrus fruit. It's important for collagen synthesis and general protein metabolism, and a deficiency can cause scurvy, which is defective bone formation and poor wound healing. Vitamin D, it promotes calcium and phosphorus use and promotes normal growth and bone and tooth formation. So we'll find this in fish liver oil, enriched milk, and eggs. Deficiency can cause rickets, which is poorly developed weak bones, osteomalacia, and bone reabsorption. Vitamin E prevents oxidation of the cell membranes and DNA, and a deficiency can cause hemolysis of red blood cells. So you can review all those slides and see what things you should be eating to get all your proper vitamins. Vitamin K is required for the synthesis of a number of clotting factors, and a deficiency can cause excessive bleeding due to retarded blood clotting. Minerals then are inorganic nutrients that are essential for normal metabolic functions. And these are some of the minerals that are included: calcium, chlorine, copper, fluorine, manganese, potassium, sulfur, zinc, including others that are in that list. Daily values will appear on food labels to help people eat healthy. It's based on a 2,000 kilocalorie diet. And normally about 60% are carbs, 30% are total fats, 10% are saturated fats, and 10% are proteins. And that is used to calculate the percent daily value. The reference daily intakes are based on the 1968 RDAs for certain vitamins and minerals. Daily reference values are set for total fat, saturated fat, cholesterol, total carbohydrate, dietary fibers, sodium, potassium, and protein. So this is just to look at a side-by-side comparison of food labels from the original label, which would be years ago, to the new label. So it's just a lot easier to see today this new label was developed in 2014 to kind of highlight how the calories are a little more in bold, as well as the serving size. So you can kind of see a couple of differences there between the original label and the new label. Metabolism then is the total of all the chemical reactions that occur in the body, and it consists of catabolism, which is the energy releasing process by which large molecules are broken down into smaller ones. And this will be the process by which we break down glucose into ATP. Anabolism is the energy requiring process by which small molecules will be joined to form larger ones. So there's different types of metabolism. Anabolism is synthesis. It's an energy requiring process. So an example of this is creating ATP from ADP and P, a phosphate group. And catabolism is a decomposition reaction which releases energy. And an example of this is taking adenosine triphosphate and breaking it apart into ADP and the phosphate group. ATP derived from catabolic reactions will drive anabolic reactions. So ATP production, the energy released during catabolism, can be used to synthesize ATP. Anabolism is the energy requiring process by which smaller molecules will join to form larger ones. So anabolic reactions result in the synthesis of the molecules for life. And the energy released from the breakdown of ATP can be used during anabolism to synthesize other molecules and to provide energy for cellular processes such as active transport and muscle contraction. And then catabolism is the energy releasing process by which larger molecules will be broken down to smaller ones. So ingested food will be the source of molecules used in catabolic reactions. So ATP is adenosine triphosphate. It's your body's source of energy throughout the entire body. It carries energy. Energy is released when ATP is broken down. Some ATP is produced in the cytoplasm of the cell, but most of our ATP is produced in the mitochondria of the cell. Carbohydrate metabolism is when monosaccharides are the breakdown products of carbohydrate digestion, with the most important being glucose. And any excess glucose following a meal can be used to form glycogen, or it can be partially broken down in the components used to form lipids. Glycogen is just the storage form of glucose, and glycogen will be stored in the liver. The metabolism of carbohydrates involves anaerobic and aerobic respiration, with glycolysis being anaerobic and the citric acid cycle being aerobic. So glycolysis is a series of chemical reactions that occurs in your cytoplasm. It will break down glucose to form 2 pyruvic acid molecules. And from here, the 2 pyruvic acid molecules, 2 ATP molecules will also be used, and 4 ATP molecules will be produced. So a net gain of 2 ATP molecules is produced from glycolysis. Anaerobic respiration is the breakdown of glucose in the absence of oxygen. And in human cells, anaerobic respiration will result in the production of 2 molecules of lactate and 2 molecules of ATP. It can be divided into 2 phases. Glycolysis is when glucose undergoes several reactions to produce 2 pyruvic acid molecules, 2 ATP, and 2 NADH. And lactate formation is when pyruvic acid is converted to lactic acid and then converted to lactate, which is the ionized form of lactic acid. So this just shows glycolysis and anaerobic respiration. It converts glucose into 2 pyruvic acid molecules, and there's a net gain of 2 ATP out of glycolysis. The 2 pyruvic acid molecules produced by glycolysis are first converted to 2 lactic acid. This conversion requires energy, which is taken from NADH, and the lactic acid molecules will release hydrogen ions, forming lactate. So this is glycolysis and anaerobic respiration in the absence of oxygen. Aerobic respiration then is the breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen to produce carbon dioxide as a waste, water as a waste product, and 38 molecules of ATP. Aerobic respiration can be divided into 4 stages. Glycolysis is that first stage where we get 2 pyruvic acid molecules, 2 ATP, and 2 NADH. Acetyl-CoA formation is just when each pyruvate acid is converted into acetyl-CoA. And the citric acid cycle, also known as the Krebs cycle, is when each acetyl-CoA molecule enters it, where NADH, FADH2, and ATP will be produced. Then the electron transport chain is a series of electron transport molecules attached to the inner mitochondrial membrane. And this is where the majority of ATP will be produced. Electrons will be transferred from NAD and FADH2 to carriers in the membrane. When they do that, hydrogen ions are released from the inner mitochondrial compartment. And some of the electron transport carriers are also hydrogen pumps, which use some of the energy from the transported electrons to pump hydrogen from the inner to the outer mitochondrial compartment. Because of an increased hydrogen concentration in the outer compartment, because they're being pumped out of there, the hydrogen ions will pass by diffusion back into the inner compartment. And when they pass through channels in the inner mitochondrial membrane, that couples the movement of the hydrogen to ATP production. If we don't have oxygen to accept the excess hydrogen and electrons, the citric acid cycle and the electron transport chain cannot function. So oxygen is essential to these two, the electron transport chain and the citric acid cycle. Without oxygen, we cannot produce the ATP that our cells and body needs. So our cells and bodies would quickly die off. So this is a great summary of aerobic respiration, taking us through the 4 kind of steps. Glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm, and then the conversion of acetyl-CoA or pyruvic acid to acetyl-CoA, and then the Krebs cycle all occur in the mitochondria. With the electron transport chain, kind of these electron transport carriers are all found in the inner mitochondrial membrane space. So here's a great look at the electron transport chain. Simply put, electrons that come from NADH and FADH2 are able to be transferred between these electron transport proteins. And when these electrons are transferred between these 4 complexes, they have little Roman numerals in them, the transfer of electrons pumps hydrogen ions to the outer compartment. And by transferring the hydrogen ions to the outer compartment, we create a greater concentration of them so that when they flow through the ATP synthase, they'll flow passively down their concentration gradient. And the ATP synthase is where we create the majority of the ATP. Lipid metabolism, so the triglycerides are the body's main energy storage molecule. Between meals, triglycerides are broken down into fatty acids and glycerol. Metabolism occurs in mitochondria, and we have a series of reactions where 2 carbons are removed for fatty acids to form acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA combines to form ketones. Too many ketones can lead to acidosis in the blood. Protein metabolism, proteins are digested into amino acids, which are taken up to the liver. They are used to make other needed proteins. Amino acids can be converted into pyruvic acid, acetyl-CoA, and the metabolism will result in ammonia, which is converted to urea in the liver. So these just take us through the overall pathway for the metabolism of food, the lipid and protein metabolism. The carbohydrate, which gets us to glucose, will go through these steps of forming ATP, where the majority of ATP will be formed. Metabolic states, the absorptive state is the period immediately following a meal. Nutrients will be absorbed through the intestinal wall into circulation and lymphatic systems. This occurs about 4 hours after the meal. Glucose will go to the cells, and some glycogen and fat as well. Fat will go into adipose tissue, and amino acids will be used in protein synthesis. The postabsorptive stage is usually late morning, late afternoon, or the night after. It's also in an absorptive state where the blood glucose levels are maintained by converting molecules to glucose The first source of glucose is the liver. Triglycerides are converted to glucose, and amino acids are also converted to glucose. So this just takes us through where nutrients will be absorbed, processed, and then stored and used, whether it's in muscle, adipose tissue, other tissues, or nervous tissue. Events of the postabsorptive state, you can see stored nutrients used, and then where the nutrients will be processed as well. Metabolic rate is the total amount of energy produced and used in the body per unit of time. And the basal metabolic rate is the energy needed to keep resting body functional. And this is used to determine the amount of your specific kilocalories needed per day. Body temperature regulation. Normal body temperature is about 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, 37 degrees Celsius. It's maintained by balancing the heat input with the heat loss, and the amount of heat exchanged between the environment and the body will be determined by the difference in temperatures. Temperature regulation can occur by dilation and constriction of blood vessels in the skin. Sweat glands, skeletal muscles are involved. Homeostasis occurs by a negative feedback loop, and the hypothalamus will be the main control center monitoring your body temperature. Radiation is the gain or loss of heat as infrared energy between two objects not in physical contact. And an example is the sun, hot sand, or snow. And conduction is the exchange of heat between objects that are in direct contact. So for example, contact of the bottom of your feet with the ground. Convection is the transfer of heat between body and air or water. And an example is the cool breeze over a body. And evaporation is the conversion of water from liquid to gas. And an example is the water from the body surface. So here's a look at heat exchange, showing the different examples that we just talked about: radiation from the sun and water, evaporation of the sweat, water from inside the body, convection from the cool breeze, and radiation from sand, and conduction, direct contact from the hot sand. Temperature regulation, so this shows the homeostatic negative feedback loop. So if the body temperature increases above normal, receptors and control center will send a signal to the hypothalamus, which will tell your effectors to increase sweating to help with evaporative heat loss, and also dilating your skin blood vessels to increase heat loss from the skin. If we have a decrease in body temperature, your blood vessels will begin to constrict to try to decrease heat loss from the skin, as well as your skeletal muscles might start shivering, or you might feel a cold sensation that you want to put on a warmer jacket. And that's the end of this chapter. Thanks for listening, guys.